Good evening. Those of you joining us online, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Those of you that are here, thank you for being here this evening. And so we're going to be looking in Genesis chapter 1. We're going to be continuing on in our Apologetics 101 study that we've been going through. And so tonight it is titled In the Beginning. And so I want to clarify one thing before we ever get started. One, I'm gonna read to us a few pages or a few things out of a book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist," and where a lot of this study comes from. And but I want to clarify that as we begin this study tonight, is that what I'm going to say is we're going to have a science lesson tonight. Just to be honest with you. So what I'm going to say about the Big Bang Theory and a lot of things about the Big Bang Theory, and we're going to have some explanation about that theory. I want you to know kind of beforehand, just everything that I say doesn't mean that I believe in the Big Bang Theory, okay? So I want to kind of make that clarification before we ever start, and we'll have some explanation of those kind of things. But read with me here in Genesis chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 1, and it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water. Then God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And then there was evening, and then there was morning one day. Then God said, 'Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters.' And God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below and the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called that expanse heaven. And there was evening, and then there was morning a second day. And then God said, 'Let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear.' And it was so. And God called the dry land earth. And the gathering of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And then God said, 'Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seeds, and fruit trees, and the earth bearing fruit after their kind, each with seed in them.' And it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seeds in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. And then there was evening, and then there was morning, a third day." In verse 14, "Then God said, 'Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, and separated the day from the night, and let them be for the signs, for the seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the heaven, to give light on the earth.' And so it was. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. And he also made the stars. And God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and then there was morning, a fourth day." I want to stop right there. And as we look at the beginning of what God created, and looking at the beginning of time, and this is, I just want to be honest with you, this is where the beginning of what we know as time began. Outside of this, time didn't exist. God doesn't, and in fact, God still, even to this day, God still does not exist in the realm of time. He exists outside of the realm of time, while we exist inside the realm of time. And so before all of this happened, before God created all of these things that we just got through reading, there was no such thing as time that ever existed. And so I want to make sure we understand that. And so we're going to look at a couple of things, and so I want to read to you from the book that I was talking to you about just a minute ago. It's Not Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And I want to read a couple of things to you from some very intelligent people that are way far more intelligent than I ever will be or ever really could even dream to be. But I want to show you some things in which that they saw and some things that even changed their minds in their hearts in the things in which that they believed. And so I want to read to you here out of this book, out of chapter 3. And it says, it was 1916, and Albert Einstein didn't like where his calculations were leading him. In his theory of general relativity was true, it meant that the universe was not eternal, but it had a beginning. So I want to tell you that in the beginning of Albert Einstein, as he began this process to look at general relativity and look at this theory in which that he had, he wanted the earth. I'm just going to be honest. He wanted time. He wanted the earth. He wanted the universe. He wanted all of existence. He wanted it to be eternal. But yet within his findings, he found that it was not eternal, but yet that it had a beginning. And in fact, in his findings, Albert Einstein called his discovery irritating. It says that it was irritating that he found within his own discovery of general relativity that it was irritating to find out that all things created had a beginning. And so in 1919, a British cosmologist, Arthur Eddington, conducted an experience during a solar eclipse which confirmed Einstein's theory of general relativity, and that it was indeed that it was true that the universe was not static, but yet that it had a beginning. And then not only that, but then there was another scientist in which that we are all very familiar with, one that Mr. Hubble, that created what we know as the Hubble telescope, right? And he himself even found in looking into the expanse of the universe and the stars, and that everything was expanding. Everything was continuing to expand, which only proved again the truth of the theory of general relativity in which Einstein. And so then Einstein, going and hoping that he was wrong, hoping that the other gentleman was wrong, hoping that Stubble was wrong, that Hubble was wrong, and so then he goes himself to look through this 100-foot telescope to only find out again that he was wrong and that his theory was true. And so within these findings, it says, although Einstein said that he believed in a pantheistic God. Does anybody know what a pantheistic God is? So let me tell you what a pantheistic God is. Pantheistic God is a God that is the universe. So a pantheist believes that God is the universe itself, or is all of creation itself. That's what they believe, okay? And so with this, he found out within his findings that general relativity was true. Now this is considered to be one of the smartest men that has ever lived in human existence. Finds out that in his life, he finds out that even though he has believed in a pantheistic God, finds out that he was wrong in his study through his theory of general relativity to find out that there was no pantheistic God, but there is a theistic God. What is a theistic God? A theistic God is one that believes that there is a God that created everything. Okay? There is a God that created all things. That is a theistic God. That is a creator God. And so he comes to this conclusion. I'm not saying that he was a believer. I'm not saying that he believed in the God in which that we believe, but he came from the belief of a pantheistic believer to a theistic believer, right? Through his scientific findings. And so I know most of us are probably, most of you are probably going, okay, this is this is not what I signed up for. A science class is not what I signed up for. I signed up for, to learn how to share my faith. Well, this is important for us as apologists, as Christians, to learn these kind of things, because I'm going to tell you the biggest argument that you're going to come up with when you start talking to a proclaimed atheist or even an agnostic is conversations like this right here. And it's important for us to know what a cosmological argument is. What is a cosmological argument? This is the beginning. Cosmological argument is the beginning of the end of a dispute or a discussion or a debate with an atheist. Okay? So let me just share that with you. Anybody know what cosmological is? Anybody know what a cosmological comes from? The Greek word where we get cosmos, right? Cosmos means universe. Cosmos means universe, means world, means universe. And so the cosmological argument is this. It is the argument from the beginning, for the beginning of the universe. It is for the beginning of all things. And so if the universe, and this is where it's very important for us as believers in this argument, okay, is that if the universe, if all things had a beginning, then it had a cause. Right? And so this is the most important thing for us to understand, is that anything that has a beginning has a cause or a purpose. Nothing is created without purpose. Nothing is created without cause. And so everything that is created has cause. And so then if the universe and all the things in which that we see, when we walk outside and we look into the expanse of the universe, we look into the expanse of the sky and we see all the stars, it has a purpose. We just read some of what God's purposes are for the expanse of the sky in which that there is, and the stars that are there is to give light in night. Right? The moon is to give light in night. The sun is to give light during day. And so there's purpose, there's cause behind the creation or behind the beginning of those things. In logical form, the argument goes like this. Everything that has a beginning had a cause. The universe then has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. If you remember we didn't meet last week, but the week before, if you remember, we talked about the premise. I don't know if you remember talking about the premise. The premise is this, is that if someone makes an argument, it can be possible and it can be probable. And it has to be possible and it has to be probable in order for it to be true. But it can be possible, but yet not probable, which then makes it false. Right? And so I want to look at a couple of premises of the beginning of the universe. In premise 1, everything that had a beginning had a cause. In the law of causality, okay? In the law of causality, which is the fundamental principle of science. And we talked about even last week, listen, we can't have Christianity without science. And I don't believe that you can have science without Christian belief. I think they both go hand in hand. And so the fundamental things and principles of science is this. Without the law of causality, science is impossible. And the law of causality is this, is that if something has a beginning, it has a cause. And scientists all over the world and all throughout history have tried to find out what caused what, right? And so just like Albert Einstein in this, he's trying to find out. In fact, in Albert Einstein's last days of his life, especially after finding the theory of general relativity, one of the things that he says is, I want to know how God did it. I don't need to know all the details. I just want to know what he was thinking. I want to know what those are the thoughts of one of the smartest men in history, right? And so here when we talk about scientists trying to discover what caused what, the one thing that we know about the universe is this, through scientific study, is things in the universe do not happen without a cause. What do you know? I mean, if you can think of anything in life that happens without a cause, let me know. Because there's some cause somewhere of everything that happens. And so to deny the law of causality is to deny rationality. And rationality is putting together thoughts, the cause, and the effect. So if premise one is true, okay? So if premise one is true, is that everything that happens has a cause. Premise number two, did the universe then have a beginning? So we know that everything that happens has a cause, has a purpose, right? So now we need to look at premise number two. Does the universe have a beginning? Did it have a beginning? Well, according to science, yes, the universe and everything in the world had a beginning. In fact, if it didn't, then we wouldn't need anything that we have if there was no cause. And so, Einstein's discovery of the theory of relativity is still today the strongest proof of evidence that we have for a cosmological argument, and that there is the existence of a theistic God. Even though, and I want to tell you this, and this is how God works, okay? Even though Albert Einstein, in what everything that I have read about him, was not technically a believer, one of the greatest theories in the history of mankind by a man himself that does not technically believe or did not technically believe in God, proved through his theory that there is a God. That's how God works. Is that God will use anyone and God will use anything to show himself. And that is, to me, that is the beauty of God. So let me ask you this. Cosmological comes from the Greek word, as we said a while ago. It comes from cosmos. And so what is this cosmological argument? It is the argument from the beginning of the universe. And if the universe had a beginning, then the universe then has a cause. Einstein's discovery has 5 lines of scientific evidence that has been discovered or that has been proved beyond reasonable doubt. Okay, so beyond reasonable doubt, it has proven that the universe did indeed have a beginning. This is important to us as Christians. In our argument or in our defense of the gospel, it's important for us to know that there is scientific evidence. Because I'm going to tell you, when we are talking to someone about the gospel, someone that is an atheist or agnostic, the number one thing that they're going to argue against is the scientific proof that there's a God. And so the scientific proof that there's a God is the scientific proof that there was a beginning. Which then, I'm just going to tell you, then the atheist is going to say then to you, yes, okay, so the world had a beginning, and we call it what? The Big Bang Theory, right? That's what they're going to tell you. Science calls it the Big Bang Theory. Yes, okay, so there was this huge Big Bang, and everything exploded, and is what has created everything that there is today, right? Whether it's stars, whether it's the moon, whether it's the sun, it's earth, it's life, all of those things from that one bang, everything was created. Scientifically, this particular theory is called the surge theory, which is an acronym, okay? Scientifically, it's an acronym. So here's where we're going to, I know you're probably already thinking, man, we've already got a science lesson. Well, we're going to get some more science lesson, and then we're going to dive into some other stuff, okay? So hang tight with me. So the S in surge stands for this, the second law of thermodynamics. It's the second law of thermodynamics, which says that the universe is running out of usable energy. Okay? So it says that, this particular theory is saying that the universe is running out of usable energy, and scientists believe that at some time or another that the universe is eventually going to run out of energy, and when it does, it's going to stall, and then it's going to die. Okay, so that's what the S stands for. And you're probably looking at me going, so what? Right? Well, I think that we have to go back, and so since that's the second law of thermodynamics, I think that we have to go back and look at the first law of thermodynamics to understand the second law. So the first law of thermodynamics is this. It states that the total amount of energy within the universe is constant. In other words, the universe has a finite amount of energy. What does that mean? Well, look at it this way. Your car, it holds a finite amount of gasoline, right? So if you started your car 10 years ago with a full tank of gas, would it still be running today? No, because it would have run out of gas because it had a finite amount of gas. So this is what the first and second theory of thermodynamics is telling us. And so it's going to eventually run out of gas. And so because the universe is still existing, then it's telling us, even though it's expanding, and it tells us that it's eventually going to run out of energy, what that tells us is this, is that the universe is not infinite. Which proves, again, the theory of general relativity, which that everything had a beginning. Because if everything has a beginning, it has an end. Right? If it has a beginning, it has a cause, and it has an end. That's the way that it works. Therefore, it proves again that the universe is not eternal. And so then the U in Surge is this. The universe is expanding. Right? So the universe is expanding. Edwin Hubble, a legendary astronomer, which we talked about just a minute ago, looks through his telescope, in which that he has, and he can see, or he could see that the universe itself was, and I'm just going to try to give you a small example, that the universe was gradually expanding like this, okay? That's a very small yet quick, fast scale of what he's able to see, but yet he can see that the universe is expanding. How? Well, if you could watch a video recording of the history of the universe in reverse, this is what you would see. So if we could go back in history and we could watch, or we could start from now and go all the way back into history, and we watch, you would see everything begin to collapse back onto itself. But here's the key to that. And here's where the atheist will, or even agnostics will come into this, is that, okay, so this to me, this proves the Big Bang Theory. This is where they're going to come from. This is not where I'm coming from, okay? This is where they're going to come from. Well, that just proves to us that if everything was to come back, it was to play everything back in reverse, it's all going to come back in on itself, shows us that it all came from one place, and then boom, it all exploded in the Big Bang Theory, and everything blew up and scattered where it is. However, the thought that we miss is this, is that if you play it back in history, this is scientifically proven, that if everything was to come back in on itself, yes, it would all gather up into one place until there was absolutely nothing. Which is where the atheists lose themselves. Which is where even agnostics lose themselves, is because when they think about everything coming back, if everything was to play in reverse and come all the way back and fold in on itself, okay, yeah, that sounds really good until you start talking about that it collapses upon itself until there's absolutely nothing. What do you do with that? What do you do with the creation of everything from nothing? It's important for us to understand that nothing can create everything. on its own. You can't create something from nothing on your own. The universe itself could not create everything from nothing on its own. And so, then there's the R, okay? The R of surge is the radiation from the Big Bang. Okay, this is what scientists are saying. In 1965, an accidental discovery. This was accidentally discovered by Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, who discovered a very strange radiation in the universe. And so how they did this is on their antenna at the Bell Labs that happens to be in New Jersey. And this radiation was supposedly an afterglow from the Big Bang fireball explosion known as the cosmic background radiation. Okay? I know most of you are going, that means nothing to me. Well, the discovery was the proof of a prediction made 20 years previous to the finding by two other scientists who stated that if the Big Bang Theory really happened, then there has to be a fireball of radiation still out there in space. So 20 years before this finding happened, somebody made a prediction that if the Big Bang Theory was true, then this has to be true. And then 20 years later, they find it, right? So then G in the word surge, great galaxy seeds. In 1989, there was another discovery that NASA found called COBE. It was a satellite that went up into the universe there in the atmosphere, and there was predictions about ripples and temperature behind that particular radiation that was found. And not only did COBE was successful and brought evidence back of cosmology, they say that the explosion was precisely tweeted to cause just enough matter to congregate to allow for the galaxy to formulate without collapsing upon itself. So, in other words, this radiation that is there, it exploded in just the amount, and here, I know people are going, man, this is just really a lot of information, but here's what we need to know. Scientists are telling us that there is proof that even if there was a Big Bang, that it happened precisely in a way, like and this is probably a bad illustration, all the stars had to line up, right? In order for everything to explode the way that it did, radiation had to be exactly the right amount of heat in order for everything to go, because if not, and it would explode, it would all collapse back onto itself. That's what this discovery was. And then we have E, Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein's theory proves that time, space, and matter all have a beginning. But not that it just has a beginning, but they all have the same beginning. Time, space, and matter all have a beginning, but not just any beginning, but they all have the same exact beginning. And one cannot exist independent of the other. Time cannot exist outside of space and matter. Matter cannot exist outside of space and time. They can't exist outside of each other. So, with this particular evidence that's been given to us, it tells us that there is a beginning. Whether the Big Bang Theory happened or not, okay? Whether the Big Bang happened or not, there is a beginning. And so, because there's a beginning, there has to be a creator. So then the next question, so when you have this discussion with someone that wants to get into the scientific stuff with you, the next thing that comes is this. Okay, so if time, space, and matter all have a beginning, okay, if that premise is true, and then the premise that because time, space, and matter exist and it all has a beginning, then if the premise is true that because it exists and because it has a beginning, it has a cause. If that's true, if both of those are true, the next question that's coming is, then who created God? Then who created God? When did God come into existence? And so here is my argument for that, or here is my rebuttal to that. And so now that we've gained, all the evidence, I think scientifically, spiritually, biblically, we've gained the evidence that time has a beginning, that space has a beginning, matter has a beginning, everything that we see that is in this world has a beginning. Then there must be a creator, right? And so then the question comes, who created God? And when we bring God into this particular equation as a creator or the beginner, and we ask the question, who made God? Then we have to answer this. If everything that exists needs a cause to exist, then doesn't God need a cause too? Well, I think that takes us back, that we have to go back to something we talked about a while ago, which was the law of causality. The law of causality says this. The law of causality says or states that everything that comes into being needs a cause. Everything that comes into being needs a cause. So the answer to that question for me is, and using their own science against them, I would then say God did not come into being. God did not come into being. God has always been. And if God has always been, then God needs no beginning. And if God needs no beginning, God needs no cause, so he doesn't fit into the premises. Which then proves that God is, he himself, eternal. Because God doesn't have a beginning. And if God doesn't have a beginning, he doesn't necessarily have a cause. And if he doesn't have a beginning, he doesn't have a cause, then that means he's eternal. If you go back to the theory of general relativity, what was it that Einstein wanted to prove so wrong? He wanted to prove that the existence of the universe and the creation of the universe was eternal, that it didn't have a beginning, but he found out that it had a beginning. And because of that, his theory was true. God doesn't fit in that theory because God doesn't have a beginning. Well, if it's possible to have an eternal creator, then is it possible then to have an eternal universe? Okay, so I'm just trying to give you some ideas that may come your way. So people are going to say, okay, well, all right, so if we go with the fact that you say that God is eternal, if God is eternal, then couldn't the universe be eternal? It's possible, but it's not probable. Why is it possible? Yes, it's possible, because God could do anything he wanted to. It's not probable because science tells us that it's not. Not only does science tell us that it's not, Scripture tells us that it's not. Scripture tells us that it had a beginning. So not only does the Bible tell us that everything had a beginning, but science tells us that everything had a beginning. And so then it's possible, but it's not probable, therefore it is not true that the universe is eternal. So there are only two possibilities for a universe and its existence. is that there is something that is eternal that exists outside of the universe. So let me kind of backtrack just a few places here. You remember a while ago I was telling you about how that if we played everything in reverse, how that all creation, the universe, everything would fold back down onto itself. And eventually it would fold so far down onto itself until there was absolutely nothing left. The reason why it would do that is because it then proves to us scientifically and biblically that everything that was created from nothing but the spoken word of God. That everything was created from nothing except for the spoken word of God. And I've had this conversation with so many people. They're like, and they want to argue the Big Bang Theory. And so I'll be honest with them. You know what? Could the Big Bang Theory be true? Absolutely. God could have caused it to happen the way in which that it happened. And there's no other way that it could have happened. Remember I was telling you a while ago that the radiation was at the right amount of heat within that explosion in order to keep everything from collapsing on itself? How do you think that happened? If it's true, God. And there's so many other things, and I'm not a scientist. I never even did very good in science in school, period. But a few of the things that I have learned is this, is that everything that you and I know in existence, but between the sun and the moon and the earth, the water, the stars, gravity, all of these things exist within very small, minute degrees. I mean, the earth sits on an axis, and we've discussed this before. The earth sits on an axis, and just a few degrees one way or the other, we either burn or we freeze. Tell me how that happens outside of a creator. How does, in a universe with where gravity outside of the Earth's gravitational pull, okay? The Earth itself sits within this axis with no gravity. And yet it doesn't tilt one way or the other off of its axis because it's held there by the hand of God. You know, I mean, how many times have you ever been looking up into the sky, into the stars, and see a falling star? Our sun is a star. And it hasn't fallen from the sky. And yet it stays exactly where it's at. How? By the hand of God. You know, the way that the earth rotates and the way that the moon sits, and again, I don't have all the scientific lingo and know all that kind of stuff. However, I do know that in the rotation of the earth and the way that the moon, listen, if it's off, tsunamis are coming. I mean, the way that the water shifts and the rise and the lowering of the tides, listen, I mean, we're talking massive catastrophes. Yet it's all held by the hand of God. And so, and that doesn't even get into creation of mankind. We're just talking about, we're talking about the bones of the structure of the universe. If the Big Bang Theory was true, okay, and everything exploded, and it all exploded exactly how it has, how it's turned out today, explain to me life. I'm not an extraterrestrial believer, okay? I'm just going to tell you. There are some that are, and that's fine. Hey, to each their own. I don't believe in aliens. I don't believe there's life on other planets. However, life only exists on earth. Scripturally, life exists here. Scripturally. How is that when there are numerous, I mean, there are planets that exist that we don't even know yet. I mean, and they're discovering new planets all the time. But life as we know it only exists on earth. And so from that, the theory of atheism and even some agnostics is that life began from a very small microorganism that happened within the Big Bang Theory. First of all, in the Big Bang Theory, that if there is no life on any other planet, stars, or anything else out there, where did that one living microorganism come from that then would only exist on one planet? And it just happened to be ours, okay? But even then, you take that one small, minute microorganism to create all, listen to me, all life forms. All life forms. That's trees and grass and plants and weeds and humans and animals. I mean, that's all insects. Snakes even. Y'all know I don't like snakes. But all life forms from one microorganism. I love, listen, I'm not a scientist, I'm not scientific or anything, but I love the anatomy of the human body because it is so complex. It is so complex that there are certain things within your body that if they act wrong, it messes everything up. If something doesn't develop properly, it messes everything up. That how life is then created in the reproductive system is crazy, that one microorganism would find a way through almost all life forms to find a reproductive system that is different in between life forms. It's a little far-fetched for me. It's a little far-fetched for me. It makes more sense because I try my best to be. I try my best to put myself as a realist. I try my best to put myself as an evidentialist. And I try my best to put myself in all of these different areas. And when I put myself as a realist, is that the reality for me is that this watch didn't just create itself. Right? It didn't just, there didn't happen to be some kind of microchip laying on the counter, and one day it just kind of decided to turn into this smartwatch. By the way, this smartwatch, and Apple's not paying me to say any of this, by the way, but will read my blood ox. It'll read my heart rate. It'll even tell me if my heart's out of rhythm or not. It tells me time. It tells me if I have walked enough or not. Usually it's telling me get up. It tells it all kinds of things. It has a calculator on it. Like it'll tell me what's north or south. I mean, all those kind of things didn't just happen because there was a microchip laying on the counter and it just decided to become a smartwatch. There was a creator. Someone, and I have no idea how this is all put together. I have no idea how all that programming and all that kind of stuff. I have zero idea. To me, it's a Greek. If somebody was to sit there and start explaining all, it's like Greek. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. In fact, I'll just be honest with you. It's really hard to believe that someone could make something as smart as this that fits on my wrist. Yet there was a creator that created it, even though it's hard to believe. And there's evidence of it. And so for me, as a realist, and even as an evidentialist, is that there's reality and there's evidence that there's a creator. Scientifically and biblically, there's a creator. And so in our life as Christians, it's important for us to know this. It's important for us to know this so that when we talk to someone that doesn't know, we talk to someone that they're lost, they don't understand, listen, let me give you some evidence. Or even if it's this, okay, even if it's just the simple fact of this, is listen, I know without a shadow of a doubt that there's evidence out there that can show you that there is a God. Even if it's that, to some people, that's enough. Listen, if I can show you scientifically, not just biblically, because a lot of times people are like, oh, the Bible, right? Okay, let me show you scientifically. That'll start speaking to some people. Let me show you scientifically, I can prove that there's a God. Okay, now I'm listening. That's important for us to know as believers. It's important for us to know as we walk through this life that it's important for us to know that not only does the Bible prove it, but science does too. Let me pray for us. God, I love you. Thank you. First of all, I thank you for your word. One, that your word is true, absolute truth. But God, not only that, but I pray that you have given us evidence here on this earth. That you've given us evidence within science to show us that your word is true. To show us that there was a beginning. To show us that you were the one that spoke everything into existence from nothing. And that you are the creator of all. And that God, as believers, that we can take that and Father, that we can hold that, we can know that, we can stand by that. Because there's a lost and dying world out there that is so confused and lost in the dark and we have the light. And may we shine that light bright with truth. Again, God, we just thank you. We praise you. We ask all this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Those of you joining us online, I want to say thank you so much. I pray that you would come back and join us next week.